Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. My name is John Geese. I am the founder and chief growth officer at RAS Squared. Today, my colleagues and I are hosting Business Espresso, your jolt of business acumen. Our hosts have an extensive background in their respective fields of sales and marketing, accounting, risk mitigation, and wealth management, as well as law and organizational development. Their backgrounds all come together to help small business owners thrive. But today, our expert comes from a niche of workplace wellness and productivity. Every other week, you can find us here on Zoom at 1 o'clock Mountain Time. We offer a different topic with a different expert to help you create, build, and optimize your business. Each presentation gives you one or two actionable steps to walk away with, making you better at running your business as opposed to being run by your business. Make sure to add us to your calendar. Before I introduce today's hosts, a little reminder. This is interactive. Please post your questions in the chat and the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we get our panelists to answer that. After our presentation, we will also open this up for questions. So let me tell you a little bit about our hosts. As I said, I'm John Geese. I'm the growth strategist from RAS Squared. I help small business owners grow their business quickly and predictably. Christina Gilbertson is the owner of Gilbertson Law. She uses her business law expertise to help small business owners protect themselves. Mike Hurdle is the founding member of Tax Time CPAs, and his expertise lies in accounting and tax strategy. And Sam, who is on a trip today, is an award-winning financial advisor with Northwestern Mutual, helping guide his clients through risk mitigation and wealth management. And finally, to our presenter today, my friend Bob Wendover. For over 2 decades, Bob has been helping organizations improve workplace performance by helping them to understand and manage challenges like generational differences, decision-making, and today's topic, overcoming overwhelm, beating burnout in today's crazy, busy world. You will walk away with these insights: why actively managing your blood glucose levels will boost your energy throughout the day. 3 questions that will shorten meetings, and who doesn't want to shorten a meeting? And 5 phrases that will reduce your time commitment without irritating those around you. Without further ado, let me introduce and please welcome Bob Wendover.
Thank you, John. Let me ask a couple of questions. When I make presentations like this, I generally start with asking some questions to kind of get in the mood about all of this. When was the last time you sort of, zoned out into space? When was the last time you looked at a Zoom screen and couldn't for the life of you remember the name of the person on that screen who you work with all the time? When was the last time you tried to put deodorant in your hair, or maybe hairspray in your underarms because you weren't paying attention? You were lost in thought. When was the last time that you couldn't remember your kids' names, perhaps, while you were introducing them to someone? Those are all signs of decision fatigue. And I teach people, as John mentioned, I teach people how to make. One of the challenges that we're facing now is the of decisions that we're actually making. A social scientist named Roy Baumeister coined the term decision fatigue about 20 years ago. And I don't think Dr. Baumeister had any idea how relevant his identification of this topic was going to be over a period of time. In most studies, about 30,000 decisions per day, which is about twice what it was even 10 years ago. And the major reasons for that, of course, are the fact that we're dealing with not just the technology, but also the social media and the scroll on Facebook and on other types of platforms. Of course, the explosion, how many different options we have for everything and so on. And as a result, we're making so many more decisions that it's wearing us out. I've bought hundreds and hundreds of And one of the things that I've noticed is once I stopped using a travel agent and started using the online number of decisions I have to make has exploded. It's now to fly from here to Chicago and back, it takes about 15 or 20 decisions to do that. If you go to machines in the grocery store to renew your driver's license, you have to go through about 20 different screens in order to just simply get a driver's license or renewed or a registration renewed. So a lot of the onus of what we do for us is now being done by ourselves. Not to mention the fact that you've got just endless texts and emails and all kinds of different things that are coming up, which means that if you get out of bed in the morning and you spend your first 15 minutes clearing you are taking the energy right off the bat simply because uh, those decisions depletes a certain amount of those. You see, blood glucose is generated by the digestive tract. It's dependent upon what you eat, such as food, vegetables, potatoes, all the different carbohydrates. And as it generates that glucose is used to power the body for all intents and purposes. It's stored in the liver. It's regulated by insulin, which is produced by the pancreas. And about 20% of it is used by the brain just to normally function. Every single decision. So if you take a step back from that and think about the different decisions that you make every day, it's not just the conscious decisions such as which project to work on or which conversation to have, but it is also things like driving. So if you get stuck in a traffic jam on your way to work and all you've been doing for 30 minutes is just moving the wheel a little bit to the left and a little your email while you're doing it or what have you, and you get to the office and you feel like done anything, that's the reason why. The brain is constantly working in that sense. Challenges that we face is what can we do to reduce the number of decisions that we make? Because the best 3,100 of them over the past. One of the things that I've seen in the patterns and the analysis that I've done is they delegate to others, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And they also automate and so on. So think about you right now. Think about your routine and the way that you get up in the morning. You're all for all intents and purposes. And as a result of that, you have what might be arguably total control. But the reality is, most of the time, we don't feel like we have control. In fact, I was joking with somebody the other day that I'm self employed and therefore I work half time, 12 hours a day. And that's a tired old joke, but we are all victims of that if we allow ourselves to be. So think about your routine as you go through this day, just this day alone, or maybe the next day. We're coming back from a holiday. What's to do to catch up? And of course, then we find ourselves making even more decisions sometimes when we've gone on vacation or when we've taken a couple of days off for whatever reason and we're racing to catch up. That adds to the pressure, it adds to the number of decisions. But we can't increase the amount of glucose that we have or the amount of sugar energy that we have because the body regulates it. In fact, I'm always amused people ordering $7 drinks, those triple shot ups. Hey, I'm going to get a boost of sugar, especially the high school students who think that's going to power them through fourth period, put them to sleep because it's overloading the system. And so we have to think about that from that standpoint and say, what can I do? And the key to it to a large degree is two things. Number one, making fewer decisions. And number two, making the right decisions. And as I work with individuals, the three things that I suggest they do, the three questions is number one, what can I eliminate? I challenge you even after this session, sometime during the next day or so, start a list and start keeping track of, well, what kinds of decisions do I make? And that can be everything from clearing email and selling to customers to making contacts with vendors to dealing with the administrivia that takes place in any small business and so on and so forth. And once you have that list over maybe a period of 2 or 3 days, let it accumulate so that you can be as comprehensive as you can. Then go back and ask yourself three questions. One, what can I eliminate? because there's a lot of stuff that we do that we don't need to be doing. And I know myself even now, and I'm conscious of it, and I've written the book on it. I'm forever looking and saying, gee, do I really need to do this? Gee, do I really need to do that? And sometimes I just keep doing it anyway because old habits die hard and it's hard to change. One of the biggest challenges we face as humans is the fact that anytime there's uncertainty change or change generates discomfort. I'm forever saying to people, one of the most best decision makers is the fact that they're comfortable with being uncomfortable. In other words, when there's change, when they have to have a tough conversation with somebody, when they need to reach out to somebody they don't know for fear, there's always that fear of rejection or a person's going to say no or what have you, they are able to compartmentalize that. Habits. Clear, the book Atomic Habits, which has been #1 on the bestseller in weeks and weeks. He's got some very good points in there about the fact that that is part of this process. These two, the decision making, of course, are very much tied together. And so we have to look at that and say, what can I eliminate? Second of all, what can I delegate? Small business owners are, let's put our cards on the table. We spend an awful lot of time thinking, oh, only I can do what I need to do, or only I can do what needs to be done, or only I can. And so it's difficult else. But obviously, there are positives to that. Number one, it takes it off your plate, which is the top here, but it also builds trust because once you delegate it to someone else, you can watch how they grow, and that improves retention. And you find maybe perhaps they found a better way to do what you've asked them to do than you could do it yourself because they have a different perspective. And in addition to that, it builds that relationship that you need with the people who work for you to be able to make decisions with customers, excuse me, and with vendors and so on without you being there all the time. We do, as employers, create an awful lot of dependency among our employees. And sometimes we complain about the parade in the office, people constantly coming in and saying, what do I do? What about this? What do I do? I can't make that decision. Well, sometimes we kind of enable that by just making the decision and saying to ourselves, for me to give them the answer than it is for me to say, okay, well, let's take a couple of minutes and work this through. How would you handle it? But when we do that, eventually we can delegate successfully. And finally, number three, ask yourself, what can I automate? In this world we have, you can pick up a smartphone and have access to millions of different applications that you can download for virtually nothing in most cases that will accomplish a variety of things. And then there's all kinds of other vendors and platforms out there that can do that. Some of them cost some money, some of them don't. But what can we do to automate some of the things so that we don't have to worry about them? Automating schedules, automating service for cars, automating a whole variety of other different types of things that we just normally do that we can, if we don't have to worry about them and we know that when the reminder comes up, we take care of it, we don't have to keep it in the back of our minds. Because the brain has a funny way, once you put an incomplete in there, of bringing it up on a regular basis. And so the more that happens, that takes some of the sugar energy, that takes some of the blood glucose, if you will. We have to be careful about that. So let me stop there for a second, see questions, what you might have about that. I've got a couple of other things I want to cover, but does that make sense to you? Yes, I'm seeing heads nodding. Questions, thoughts, resonating? Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot more of it obviously in the book. We have 20 minutes here, so I don't have a whole bunch of time. But there's about 40 different strategies that I've really defined about not only working with yourself, but working with others in terms of doing that type of thing. So,
Bob, I don't see any questions from our attendees, but the question that I always struggle with is the delegation question. How do I delegate and know that it's going to get done right?
well, I think that comes down to thinking about the best expectations. Too many times and I know I've been guilty of this myself. We don't do a very good job of delegating. We don't define what we need, what the expectations are, and we don't go back to them. So if somebody starts doing something wrong, I always try to go back and say, okay, well, let's talk about what we agreed you were going to do, and let's talk about what you're doing. And if those don't match, we have to figure out where the gap is. But I always place the responsibility on the other person by saying, okay, well, how do you think we can fix this? Rather than me being directive. Because me being directive, they're immediately going to say, fine, great, you tell me what to do, I'll do exactly that. And if you don't work with them on that, if you don't massage that, sometimes they just kind of abandon it mentally or emotionally. And they say to themselves, okay, fine, I'll just do exactly what he tells me to do.
Well,
Well,
and that does nothing to stop the overwhelm, right? That just puts it all on you, and you
that's right.
become
It
the
ends up putting
throttle
the
again.
monkey back on your back, as the time management experts used to talk about. Don't delegate something and have the monkey climb back on your back. But that's very true. And some of it has to do with trust too, because you may delegate something and they may do it and they're not doing it the way that you think that it should be done. If you jump on them about that, that may be the wrong thing. You may need to wait till the end to see if the outcome turns out to be what you're looking for. It's just that they came at it from a different angle.
Thank you.
Sure.
Let's see. I don't see any other questions.
Well, let me talk a little bit more. A couple of other things that I want to mention. One of those um, is how to manage other people's time. I had a conversation a couple of years ago with a woman named Lisa. Now, Lisa runs one of the large defense contractors in the United States. She oversees about 12,000 people. And I had the opportunity to spend about half an hour with her. And I asked her, in part, one of the questions I asked was, well, how do you get things done? And she said, I time chunk all of the things that I do. She said, I work 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. 5 days a week, and I never work on the weekends. And she said, that's a self-discipline that I have developed over time because I have to have time in recovery. And that's an important part of the process. But she said, I divide my days into 40-minute chunks, or excuse me, 40, 15-minute chunks. So she said, for instance, I've assigned 2 chunks of time today to this interview, which did 2 things. Number one, it demonstrated the process, but it also, number 2, kind of subtly sent me a message that you better organize your time, Bob, so that you get what you want, because at 29 minutes, I'm going to get off the phone. And so that kind of taught me a lesson and also provided a great illustration. But one of the things that she mentioned in telling me that was that she is amazed and disappointed at the number of people she works with and she has contact with who, when given the opportunity to chat with her, squander the time. She said, I've seen people any number of times come in with a 13-minute question and have 2 minutes for discussion. Why can't they come in with a 1-minute question and have 14 minutes worth of discussion? Because that gives me a chance to make a decision. And she said, by the way, I hate pushing decisions off. I make decisions, even if they're not totally right, because most decisions are relative. Decisions don't have answers, they have outcomes anyway. So better to make a decision and watch what happens than it is to wait and wait and wait until the perfect timing comes along and the perfect circumstance. She just makes the decision and goes with it, and then they respond. If something went wrong, well, then we fix it. If something went right, we learn from that and say, okay, great, where do we go from here? So it was a great demonstration of how decisive. And I guess I would challenge I would challenge you as I challenge myself all the time. How often do we stop and not make a decision because because the ducks aren't in a row, the planets aren't aligned, whatever metaphor you want to use, rather than just simply saying, okay, let's do it. And yeah, every once in a while we're going to make a mistake, no matter what we do, but none of those mistakes are going to kill us. They might cost us a little bit of money or a little bit of time, but after a while your begins to pick up and say, no, that probably wasn't a good idea. Won't do that again. But we don't know unless we try in the first place. So now let me talk a little bit about a couple of other things. I'm gonna need to watch my time here because we're getting, I just need to stay focused. I promised you to talk a little bit about how to shorten meetings. Here's something that I suggest that you do, regardless of whether you're in charge of the meeting or you're simply a participant. Use the word specifically a lot. What specifically are we trying to accomplish? And I said 3 questions. The questions that I put in the book are, at the beginning of a meeting, if you're sitting in a meeting, begin by saying, okay, so what specifically are we trying to accomplish here? Now, if you're not in charge, you can still ask that question because you can simply blame it on yourself and say, well, I wasn't clear exactly what was going on here. So what specifically were you trying to accomplish? And that will get everybody else focused in sort of a subtle way. Or if a meeting is beginning to drift, You're a participant. Why not say, help me here. I feel like I'm not quite sure what we're trying to accomplish, and draw that back in, or said a different way. I feel like we're getting off track. What exactly is it that we're trying to decide? As humans, we're very cautious about worrying about insulting other people, being too abrupt, being too in your face, or something like that. And the truth is, we also waste way too much time in meetings. Sometimes because we don't want to offend somebody, or potentially insult somebody, or have somebody take something the wrong way. And so we just don't bring it up. We just let the meeting continue to drift. And then we wonder why we're spending 45 minutes accomplishing something that could have been accomplished in 15. So we have to be more assertive along that line. But those types of questions or statements kind of help the process along in a diplomatic way. So I would encourage you to use those. By the way, I'm putting all of that stuff. I've got as I mentioned, I typed this up this morning, a 2-page little document. So if you want to send me an email, I'll send it to you so you don't have to write it all down. And then thirdly, finally, in this little session, 5 things to say to limit your time commitments. We all have time. You ever had somebody come up to you and say, do you have a minute? And 15 minutes later, you still haven't figured out what they're trying to ask? Been there? Okay. Well, here are 5 things, and you'll see them if you want to get the list. Simply say, yes, I have 1 minute right now. Well, what are they going to do with that? Most things don't take place in 1 minute, but you can be generous and give them 3 minutes. But if you say, yes, well, I've got 1 minute, and you give them 3 minutes, you're being generous, and you have also hustled the process along, as opposed to saying, sure, what's up? Because you say, sure, what's up, and they go into a big long song and dance, and all of a sudden 5 minutes later, they still haven't gotten to the point. So give them a subtle time reminder. Or say, sure, I've got 3 minutes right now. Will that work for you? Which once again does the same type of thing. And if you give them a time frame, one of 2 things will happen. It will give them a sense of urgency, and they'll say, yeah, I can probably do that in 3 minutes. Or they will say, no, we could never accomplish it in 3 minutes. Okay, then you get to find a way to frame it and say, okay, well, how much time do you think this will take? And get them to commit to a particular amount of time. Or thirdly, let's take 5 minutes right now and make a decision about that. Don't just say, yeah, let's take 5 minutes. Say, let's take 5 minutes right now and make a decision, which places the onus on them to be clear and concise, because we only have 5 minutes. Okay. Or number 4, sure, I'm happy to help. Do you have all the details so that we can make a decision right now? Because too many times people come to us and they don't have all the details. And so you bounce back and forth 2 or 3 or 4 times. So why not say, yeah, you got all the details ready? Well, no, not yet. Okay, I'll tell you what, when you have all the details, come back to me. The military is a good example of that. Never go to a commander without 3 options and allow the commander to choose which option is the best. That's kind of an ethos inside the military. We can do that as civilians too. And finally, you might say, I'd like to help, but I'm committed right now. By the way, parenthetically, I use the word, the phrase, other commitments constantly. I'm sorry, I have another commitment. Now that could mean I'm going to go get a donut. But I've never in 30 years had anybody say to me, what's your other commitment? They just say, oh, okay, fine. So I can get out of things very quickly and diplomatically by simply saying, I'm sorry, I have another commitment. So now that you know my secret, if I say I have another commitment, I dare you to ask me whether or not what that commitment is. But that aside, you can say something like, well, I'm sorry, I'd like to help, but I'm committed right now. I have about 15 minutes at the end of the day. I usually leave about 5 o'clock. Will that work? Maybe 4:45, and give them a specific time to do that. That way you're keeping the control over the time commitment, and it reduces the amount of just, hey, let's sit down and chat for a few minutes, which turns into a half an hour. So now you can adapt these, obviously. You don't have to use the exact wording, but see what you can do to adapt them in the process. So that's kind of the content that I was going to cover, and questions and thoughts. 2 things very quickly. Number 1, if you want to send me an email to Bob Wendover, or excuse me, at bobw@commonsenseenterprises.net, I'll send you all the notes. I have them. I typed them up this morning because I wasn't sure what I was going to say, so I figured I'd just type it up and then you guys can have it. And number 2, I give the book away. I give Overcome Overwhelm away. All you have to do is go to decisionfatiguebook.com and you can order it there and we'll send it to you. All you have to do is pay a few bucks for the shipping and so on. And that, again, decisionfatiguebook.com, that's on the handout if you request that. So John, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, Joseph has said he also likes to use stand-up meetings so that everybody knows that this meeting is
Yes.
going to be short.
Absolutely. Yeah. If people are standing up, meetings tend to be shorter. Yeah. Do it on the shop floor. Don't do it in the office. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bob. So thank you all for attending today. Our next session will be, and to get in touch with Bob, it's bobw@commonsenseenterprises.net. And he will send you a list of the work he presented today. And Bob, say again how people can get the book.
If they want to order the book, just go to decisionfatiguebook.com.
Great. Thank you. So our next session will be July 20th, and the topic will be accompany your buyer on the journey they take to making a decision. Kind of tying into decisions here. It'll be how do we go with our buyers as they're making a decision to buy. I will be your presenter and it will be exciting and entertaining. Shortly after that, 2 weeks after that, it will be Mike Hurdle talking about tax strategies to help you optimize your business. You can connect with us on Facebook at Business Espresso. You'll see the link in the chat. And we get together every 2 weeks. So tell your friends, invite your other colleagues. As you can see, we keep our commitment to time short, sweet, and it's for you to get actionable intelligence. On behalf of all of us, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.